Get my right notes out. Most of you know me, so I don't need to go too in depth, but after a lifetime of public service as a teacher, EMT, most recently GIS coordinator for Boone County, providing a lot of services to our community members and saving them money in the process, making things, our government more responsive, more easily accessible 24 hours a day from home, think of the Beacon website. All those things, the 911 addressing and addressing every doghouse, hen house in the county. So when you call 911, our first responders know where they're going before they get there. And they can look at it on a map. The imagery is always daylight, so they can see what awaits them, whether there's a swimming pool or a dog kennel in the backyard. You don't want to fall into either one of those things. How tall is the building, so that the firefighters know which ladder truck to bring. All kinds of things just to make things safer for our community and much more convenient. You can now apply for every permit that you need from Boone County online, pay for it online, and your permit is emailed back to you rather than having a person type it up. That's time, that's paper, toner, ink, postage, envelopes. All of those costs went away. It's automatically generated and emailed back to you once the appropriate people approve it. So that is saving the county in so many different ways. And that's the way I think. And those are the kinds of skills I'm going to take to the legislature and see if we can make our state government more responsive to our needs and more easy for us to access and navigate. And so anyway, I'm a little tired of this legislative session. I'm tired of legislation that is a solution in search of a problem. Bringing in legislation written for some other state to solve a problem that we don't even have in Iowa. Our legislature should be focusing on the lack of affordable childcare. My thought is, since public dollars should provide public service, why not vouchers for childcare instead of private schools? Think of the people that would help in this state. The people that would be allowed into the workforce where we need people that can't now for the lack of any childcare or affordable childcare. We need affordable housing. Ask the young people. I've heard that. We need good jobs that will keep our young people in the state of Iowa. I don't know about you, but how many visit your grandchildren or your children in another state? Usually I get a lot of them. There aren't resources in Iowa. There aren't good paying jobs, and there aren't communities that are welcoming to everybody. And young people are not willing to live under that kind of an environment. We need clean water. The chemicals that are leaching into our water are increasing the cancer rate. You've all seen the news that Iowa has one of the highest cancer rates, not just in the United States, but in the world. We're making the top lists in the entire world for a polluted environment, and our cancer rates are soaring because of it. The Republicans in the legislature are spending their time and our tax dollars to give us many things that we did not ask for, and as a group, we don't want. I have never, all my time talking to voters, heard one person say, I think we should spend less on educating our children. Nobody asked for that. We get one shot to do this right, and we are failing. When I was a kid growing up in Montana, I took the Iowa Basic Skills Test because Iowa was the gold standard, and everybody measured their children's educational attainment against the state of Iowa. California did. My friend in New Jersey took the Iowa Basic Skills Test. Nationwide, we were the gold standard. How often do you see someone say now, we should move to Iowa to get our kids a good education? It's not happening. This legislature has funded our schools below the rate of inflation for over a decade. And you yourself know that if you give the schools a nickel, but their costs go up $2, that they're going to have to make cuts. They make cuts to staff, they make cuts to services, they make cuts to the programs that they offer. We are no longer going to have art education or music or sports, because those are the things they can cut first. And those are the things that, for some kids, are the only reason to go to that school. And instead, the vouchers are exacerbating the issues. Instead of funding them fully, they're taking those public tax dollars and giving them to private schools. And it's just a shame. It's a transfer of wealth. And never in all my time, in my lifetime, have I heard a woman say, my OBGYN and I have been making my healthcare decisions for a long time. But you know what's missing from these conversations? We need some Republican legislators, mostly men, all of them white, with a limited understanding of the human reproductive system to help us make these critical decisions. That's what women are not asking for, and that's what we're getting. So, and this year, we are marking the 50th anniversary of the time when women were first allowed to take out a loan without a man co-signing. Young people might not realize that. And we still live, talk to Deanne, we still live with some of those draconian laws that don't allow us as women to deal with our own property. You couldn't have, when I was a child, I could not have, if that system stayed, I couldn't have bought a house, I couldn't have bought a car, I couldn't have the life that I have now without some man co-signing. And the legislation that is coming down is pushing us back to those days and relegating women to second-class citizen or third-class citizen category again. And if you want to help stop this, the only thing is going to be a more balanced legislature. You have to elect Democrats. That's the only way to prevent this downhill slide that's been happening in the state of Iowa. So step up, help out, donate if you can, volunteer if you can, even if it's an hour. I can give you an hour, I can give you 2 hours. I can write some postcards. I can make a few phone calls. I can throw, thank you, Kim, I can throw a little coffee, a little fundraiser, a little meet and greet, something like this. And you don't need a lot of people. We just need to talk to people, get them involved, get them interested and excited about making a change in the state of Iowa. So vote for all the Democrats who will stand up for this governor's extremist agenda, because you know the Republicans don't have that option. If they stand up against Governor Reynolds, she primaries them and gets them out of office. So they may sound reasonable on the campaign trail, but you know they don't really have an option. And I thank you for your time, and I ask you for your vote. Now, next up, brand new candidate, be kind, running for Senate against Randy Feenstra. And we all know, Jesse Green. Sorry, against Jesse Green. Jesse Green is the one who put forth that lovely bill that would take control of our libraries from the library board and give it to the city council. And nobody asked for that. The libraries didn't ask for that. The city council sure don't want that, because that's a lot of extra work. And so, yeah, thank you, Jesse Green. And let's put Margaret in instead.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for coming. My name is Margaret Liston, for those who don't know me, and I'm running for Iowa Senate of the 24th District. Before I go into tell you why I'm running, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a retired operating room nurse and a long-time councilwoman of Ogden City Council. I was born in Perry and raised in Beaver, Iowa, the second youngest of 7 children. Throughout my life, I've had a passion for working and caring for others and improving my community. So through the encouragement of my friend, I decided to run for Ogden City Council. Serving the people of Ogden has been rewarding. You're on the ground level of public service where you need to be honest, trustworthy, and responsive to the needs of your constituents. During my time, I've been particularly invested in the betterment of our community. That's why I co-chair the city's expanding community garden as a way to give back to those in need. Opportunity, freedom, and accountability. These are the values Iowans deserve. Unfortunately, over the last few years, Republicans have worked more for Governor Reynolds than they have for those who voted for them. I want to change that. As senator, I will work to change the direction of our state by working to make Iowa, especially rural Iowa, a place where you can live, work, and raise a family. I'm committed to bringing opportunity to all Iowans to fully fund our public schools so our students have the best education in the nation, to protect the freedom to make personal choices without interference from the government, and to bring accountability back into governance. I want to give Iowans a better deal. I cannot do this alone. My website is listed for Iowa. I'm asking you to follow my campaign on social media, which is Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. And please, when you see people, encourage them to get out and vote. Ask them if they're registered. If not, to get registered. We have to stick together and spread the word. So. And remember, listen will listen. Thank you.
I completely forgot.
Oh, that's all right.
We set up the sound system and I completely forgot. You want to use it? Okay.
I'll speak 3 times louder to make up for the first 2 as well.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my dearest friend, Ryan Melton, and our next U.S. representative from the state of Iowa.
So there was a parade here in town. I'm trying to remember when that was. Fall of last, yeah, I think
August.
so. And I've called Penny my favorite Democrat for a long time, and so much so that someone called me out and questioned me on that. They said, "You'd probably tell that to everybody," and I said, "That's not true. Penny's my favorite Democrat, and I love you, but you're not." And at the time, I was like, "Ooh, maybe I shouldn't have done that." But I was like, "No, I love Penny Vossler. She's my favorite Democrat, and that's fine. So that's the way it's going to be."
It's okay with me.
Yeah. But anywho, so I'm Ryan Melton, live in Nevada in Story County. This is my second time running for the U.S. House, and I was 4th Congressional District High there. So I always, typically do this because oftentimes I find people don't know what the 4th Congressional District is. Okay, so I just really quick. So we have 4 congressional districts. The 4th Congressional District is the Republicans' gift to itself. So that's why it looks so strange. Okay. It's one of the most conservative districts in the country. A Democrat hasn't won this seat in my lifetime, and I'm going to be 40 this year. So obviously it's a tough hill to climb, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. J.D. Scholten only lost by 3% in 2018, right? Now it took an alignment of a number of different variables at the same time to make that possible. But I'd argue that that same alignment of the variables we need is happening this cycle too. So I'll talk a bit about that here in a little bit. For the 4th Congressional District, roughly it's the northwest quadrant of Iowa with a flagpole starting from Potawatomi County down along the Nebraska-Iowa border counties to the southwest corner. With redistricting, so not running in J.D. Scholten's district, right? So they carved out Mason City Added a couple counties in Southwest Iowa, the Democrats get 20% of the vote, and that's what they do with the fourth, But yeah, so I'm 39, father of 2 boys, married to my wonderful wife Laura. Born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. So I'm a Nebraska fan, but just feel sorry for me because.
We do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
But
Well, you know what?
Right.
So my Husker, the men, because the women won last night, which is awesome. The men are the only team in Power Conference history to have never won an NCAA tournament game. We're the only one. But I've been a loyal fan ever since I was a boy. I remember listening on the radio to Nebraska basketball games when I was like 6, when we were in the NIT, But yeah, we didn't pull it out last night. But Hoiberg's great, and I'm glad he got the extension. I could talk all day about Nebraska basketball, but you're probably not here for that. So yeah, you're not here for that. So the first time I ran because no one else was going to. So it was January of 2022. Mid 2021, JD announced he wasn't running for a 3rd time. And so my wife and I were in the living room. And in mid 2021, we're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder who's going to run next. Never, ever, ever thinking it would be me. But by the time we got to January of 2022, and we're like, the filing deadline for signatures is a couple months away. Like, there's got to be someone, right? And so I talked to some people within the party, and there was no one. There was one guy that was thinking about it, but he voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020. And I had a conversation with him. He's a really good guy. He's actually fighting on behalf of Ukraine right now. He's a veteran, U.S. veteran that went over to Ukraine. But he said, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. They're not really forgiving the 2020 Trump vote. And I was like, well, understandable. I can understand that. So I was like, all right, well, if no one's going to do this, even though I had no connections, no political pedigree, no money, no nothing, I knew I'd be better than a blank spot on the ballot. And I knew that if there was a blank spot.
My campaign too, better than a blank spot.
That's right. And that's initially I was like, you know what? I can do better than that. I can do better than that. The good news is that we've proven to be more than just a name on a ballot. So last cycle, so I reject corporate PAC money completely. So we're arguably the most grassroots campaign of any congressional campaign in the country. And again, I don't come from wealth. I don't have wealthy friends, So we're as tight with our budget as we can be to be as respectful with every penny that we get from our donors. But last time, considering we only raised $54,000, which there's this assumption that congressional candidates, every single one of them raises millions of dollars. That's not necessarily true. So last cycle, there were roughly 120 major party U.S. House candidates that won the primary, roughly 120. Okay, so you don't have to be a millionaire to run for Congress. Right? You don't have to have a lot of money to run for state house or state senate either. And that's one of the things I try to dispel often when I'm recruiting candidates, right? But considering those humble beginnings, we ended up earning more votes in our congressional district than Deidre DeGear, our candidate for governor, who's a dear friend of mine. And I thought personally was a once-in-a-generation candidate that had a lot of disadvantages. Franken raised over $11 million and gave Grassley his biggest challenge in decades. And we only fell Franken's votes in the district that we didn't. So considering an over $11 million fundraising haul for him to our $54,000, I felt really proud about that too. And then, maybe what will go down as my biggest legacy if I don't win is the fight against the carbon capture pipelines. So when I announced my first campaign, my first public facing event, I was speaking to an environmental lawyer in Ames, and she said, you really should read up on this carbon capture thing. It's going to be a big deal. And at the time in early 2022, I had no idea what it was. I read up on it, and pretty quickly it was pretty easy to see this was a big scam, a big waste of taxpayer money that really imperiled our water availability and quality, our landowner rights, our public health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My opponent, Randy Feenstra, last time, and probable opponent this time, although he does have a primary candidate, a challenger this time, he's taken thousands of dollars from Summit the main company that's trying to push these pipelines via eminent domain abuse. He's taken thousands from Summit. Public in his support for these pipelines, knowing that if they were approved, people's land would be taken from them via eminent domain. There's no way around it. He was very public in his support for these pipelines. He posted about it frequently in his social media accounts, and he wrote an op-ed in support of the pipelines in late 2021. Well, a month later, I announced for Congress. And if you look at his timeline on his social media accounts, he hasn't talked about it since late 2021. So I got him to shut up, even though Rossiter spent thousands of dollars to get him to be his puppet. Now, early 2022, when I was running against these carbon capture pipelines, I was told it was a fool's errand. I was told there's way too much power, there's way too much money in this camp. There's no way you're going to stall their progress. And furthermore, the state party at that point was not in my camp either. So I was a man on an island in early 2022. I know what that laugh means. So here's the thing though. Running the most grassroots congressional campaign in the country, making a centerpiece of my campaign a push against some of the most moneyed interests this country has seen, right? And having a state party that wasn't willing to go there with me. And I did it anyway because I do what I want. Thankfully, I'm reasonable and thoughtful about what I do. Okay, I'm not reckless with that, but I do what I think is right. It's just what I do. By mid-2022, I had managed to pull the entire state party over to my position, right? So Deidre DeGear and John Norwood, our Ag Secretary candidate, when they started to campaign with me out in Western Iowa, and I'd lead off with my opposition to carbon capture pipelines, and I'd get the standing ovations, they were realizing they had missed the boat. And so I went from the state party telling me in early 2022, please don't talk about that. There's too much money on the line, please don't. To by mid-2022, them sharing my social media posts about my opposition. You know, that's probably going to be one of my big legacies if I don't win this thing, right? But I think that considering the fact that as of today, there is real doubt as to whether these carbon capture pipelines will be approved. When where we started, I was a man on an island fighting those things with $0 and 0 cents in my campaign account. I think I've shown that I punch above my weight, and I'm overweight. So, I mean, that means a lot. So anyway, this time I'm running for a lot of the same reasons I ran last time. I'm running for two primary reasons, although I could talk all day and there's a million reasons, but two primary guiding principles. The first thing is I'm running to push back against the extremism that we're seeing from Republican elected officials running the state of Des Moines and DC. The second thing I'm pushing back on is the reason and result of number one, which is there's a purposeful attempt to hollow out our state, to drive away a certain kind of voter so they can cement power where they can while they can, right? And I get Republican, and I'm not painting with a broad brush here. There are a lot of Republicans I've talked to that are very unhappy with Donald Trump, with Governor Reynolds, with their local representatives. I'm not painting with a broad brush here. I'm talking more about Republican elected officials, thought leaders of the Republican National Party, things like that, people like that. I get, Republicans who say, come on, there's no way that Governor Reynolds, the national Republicans are purposely trying to hollow out red states. There's no way. And I'd say, okay, explain a couple things to me then. Explain a couple things to me. Number one, Governor Reynolds, and you brought up child care costs in this state, right? Governor Reynolds is very well aware of the fact that we have a child care affordability and accessibility crisis in our state. She's talked about it. She's been well quoted on it. It came up in the debate last time against Deidre DeGear. She knows. She knows this in part, along with other things, is driving a massive, as you mentioned, brain drain problem where it's very hard for us to retain and attract college graduates, the experts that we need to build sustainable communities and keep them going. Well, the tell is why did Governor Reynolds reject millions of dollars in federal aid to shore up our child care system in the last year without releasing a press statement as to justifying why she did that? She doesn't want young people here, right? She doesn't want them here. Why is she attacking public education and making it so much harder for us to attract and retain talent in our schools? She doesn't want young people here. She doesn't want them here, right? She knows that the quality of life indicators in our state are plummeting. Second highest cancer incidence rate in the country, which has been brought up. We're last in the country in OBGYN availability rate. A lot of counties in our congressional district don't even have a single OBGYN, right? Last in the country in mental health care bed availability rate, especially problematic for kids dealing with crises when it comes to mental health. They have a very hard time finding treatment, right? She knows all these problems are existing and are getting worse, and she's also sitting on an almost $2 billion surplus. Why isn't she spending that money to address these problems? It's because the people that more often than not leave the state in response to these problems are people like us. They cannot beat us on policy. If you look at every single poll you can find on the pressing issues of the day and you divorce those policies from party affiliation, we win on those polls all the time. The Republican Party hasn't won the popular vote of a presidential election in 20 years. National demographic and generational shifts are not moving in their favor either. State Republican parties are going broke across the country, right? And now the National Party is really just Trump's goodie bag to pay all of his legal fees, right? They're hollowed out as a party, right? So if you were to corner someone in DC at the Republican National Committee headquarters and ask them how they're feeling right now, they're not feeling too good. So they can't beat us on policy. So what is their chess piece, which is more of a checkers piece? Suppress the vote, gerrymander, and drive a certain kind of voter out of red states to make those red states redder where they can while they can. The Kate Cox situation in Texas, I think, is the perfect illustration in the microcosm of this concept. Raise your hands if you know the Kate Cox story in Texas. Okay, so for those of you who don't, really quick, Texas has a very draconian anti-abortion law, very similar to the law that was written and passed here in Iowa that's hung up in the courts right now, the 6-week abortion ban. So Kate Cox is a young woman who, until recently, was living in Texas, who was pregnant, but her healthcare providers told her that the fetus was not going to be viable, and that the longer that she carried that fetus, her life was at risk. So a lower court in Texas agreed with her and agreed to that she hit one of the medical exceptions in this very restrictive draconian reproductive rights law to get an abortion. What happened next? Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of the state of Texas, wrote the most bullying, scathing letter he could, daring any healthcare provider in that state to provide care, even though a court found per law she was entitled to that abortion. Went up to the state Supreme Court and they reversed a lower court decision. But here's the thing, that's not a pro-life issue. The fetus was not living, right? This is not a pro-life. The only pro-life aspect of this is Kate Cox's life. And he didn't want her to have a life-saving abortion in that state. So then you ask yourself, why? Well, what's the ratio as far as voting habit of young women? They vote Democrat a hell of a lot more than they vote Republican. They don't want young women in Texas, and they don't want young people here in Iowa. So Governor Reynolds is well aware that what she's doing is hollowing out our state, but that's by design. So all the things that you two talked about, this is not just going to go away, because this is a desperate party in its last breaths, clinging to whatever power they can by pushing as much extremism as they feel the need to drive out people like us and the people we love. And the only way, and look, the Democratic Party is a Big Tent party. There are plenty of Democrats in DC that I don't align with on plenty of things. I think Joe Biden's done a lot of very good things, but there are plenty of things I don't align with him on. But we're a Big Tent party and we're adults, we're grown-ups, and we can understand that if we have some disagreements, there are bigger pressing issues, more pressing issues on the table, right? And so, yes, at the end of the day, the number one thing that you can do to push back on this extremism that's hollowing out our state, hurting our people, is voting Democratic, okay? Anyway, I'll finish on this. I'm probably well beyond my 10 minutes, Penny.
I never tired listening to you.
Oh, shucks. Final thing I'll say is this. I know that we've painted a rather bleak picture, and honestly, we don't even need to paint it for you. You live in it, you know all about it. You hear about it every day. You hear about the fact that the House Republicans wanted to got AEA or AEA infrastructure and limited debate to 6:30 on a Friday so they could get to their basketball games. Like that's how little they care about the kids of our state, especially the most vulnerable, right? There's optimism to find, and a lot of it in the bleak state of affairs in Iowa right now. The fact that, again, as I mentioned, there's a reason for the extremism, and it's not because the Republicans are operating from a position of power. It's the exact opposite. I know it's harder to see the forest from the trees when we're in a deep red congressional district. It's harder to see that, but it's true. It's true. Also, a lot was made of the fact that a lot of Democrats didn't turn out last cycle. Well, I door knocked a lot last cycle, and I door knocked a lot this one, and we'll continue to. There is a notable difference in the energy, the engagement, the awareness that Democrats have on the ground as to the stakes at play here. The energy this time is notably higher. The worry is notably higher. Part of that is because this time we've got a Donald Trump atop a ticket. That's definitely grabbing a lot of attention. But obviously, the extremism we've seen from Governor Reynolds in the House and Senate Republicans in Des Moines is also scaring a lot of people, right? And so we're going to have a much higher Democratic turnout this time. That's number one. Number two, a lot of Republicans are very unhappy as well with Trump, the National Republican Party, Governor Reynolds, and their ilk. I talk to them quite frequently. Another really unique issue, and I'll come back to this, talk a little bit about it. The really unique issue that is maybe a once in a generation opportunity for us in a deep red district is this carbon capture piece. So and if you don't know a whole lot about it, I'd encourage you to read up on it. And I posted frequently about it, because here's the thing. There is no other issue in this congressional district, in this county, in this town, that's going to get your foot in the door of a Republican household like no other than carbon capture pipelines, right? I just finished our March text campaign. We sent out texts to 25,000 Democrats in the district, but sometimes you have old phone numbers, you get occasional Republicans and independents in that batch too. And there are a number of Republicans that I reached out to in that text campaign, and the number one thing they wanted to talk about is carbon capture pipelines. And the great news is I was the first one running against them, and they know that. And so we had some really awesome conversations around that. The final piece of optimism is Randy Feenstra, my probable opponent this time, my opponent from last time, has a primary challenger. He is a twice elected congressman that has a primary challenger. That pretty much never happens. Why does that happen? Because there's vulnerability. And it just so happens that his primary opponent is just as upset about these carbon capture pipelines and all the impacts they bring as I am. And so we actually have started to talk about how we can partner in that space. Because number one, it's the right thing to do. But number two, because Randy Feenstra is so paralyzed in inaction with all the money he's taken from Rastetter, he's not going to be able to speak out on it before Election Day, and he's not going to be able to stand up for us, right? And Republicans know that in higher and higher numbers. Okay. Q&A?
Q&A.
How do we want to, like set up like 3 chairs here, or do we want to all stand?
I can stand.
Okay. Okay.
And we are live streaming,
Oh, hi, everybody.
Sam, and since there's viewers, would you repeat questions that are asked? Just
Yes, for sure.
I'm gonna try and see if I can get this. I don't know if I can get this camera unless Penny's want to stand in the middle or.
Yeah, whatever we want to do.
I'm trying to get you all on
Everyone over.
camera.
Thanks for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the dance.
Any questions at all? Don't hold back. Whatever you want to ask, we're happy to discuss. Or we'll stare awkwardly deep into your souls and pry questions out of you. Yes,
Ryan, I heard you had a closed door debate with Randy Feenstra.
I did.
Can you tell us about that? Because I saw no information that came out.
And repeat,
That was by design.
repeat his
Yes.
question.
So I was asked, I had a closed door debate with Randy Feenstra, and he wanted to know about it because nothing was disseminated about it in the press. That was by design. Okay, I'll be as brief as I can. Okay. So Randy Feenstra was the only congressional candidate that refused to debate last time. Now, if you talk to a Republican, and many Democrats do, they'd say, well, he had nothing to gain, so that's why he didn't debate you. His mathematical advantage in voter registration is so high that why would he do that? But I know Randy Feenstra more than most people. The reason he didn't debate me is because, well, I crushed him in a private debate, and I scared him into declining the request from Iowa Public Television for the debate offer. So to set that up a little bit, Randy Feenstra is very thin-skinned. So I know a number of folks that served with him in the state legislature, and they said, Ryan, this guy, he's very thin-skinned. And so when he was getting negative press and avoiding me on the debate stage from the Sioux City Journal and other outlets, I knew he was reading it, and I knew he was unhappy. I also knew because his quotes were rather nasty in those articles. He said, oh, Ryan Melton, his friends, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi don't know who the hell I am, okay, first of all. Full disclosure, the National Democratic Party has yet to reach out to me and confirm that I even exist as a person. Maybe an inch more from the state party, but which actually I'm perfectly at peace with because I do what I want. And if anyone gave me talking points, I wouldn't use them anyway. I do what I want. But anyway, so I get an email from the Iowa Corn Growers Association. Now, this is an association that loves themselves some Randy Feenstra. And Randy Feenstra loves to get ethanol in every possible part you can think of. Pop, whatever, ethanol. And so the Iowa Corn Growers Association emailed, and they said, hey, we'd like to have a joint voter forum with you and Randy Feenstra. And we used to we got a number of these different invites, and I always said yes, all the time. If you ask any journalist in the state or any entity in the state, they'll praise me for my accessibility, my willingness to participate, because I want to be accessible. But I figured Feenstra would decline that request just like every other that he declined. But for some reason, he accepted this one. And when I saw that he accepted it, I was as giddy as a kid on Christmas morning. I was ready to go. And so I had 2 weeks to read up on ag tax policy, ag trade policy, ag infrastructure policy, whatever you think of. So the night of the event in front of the Iowa Corn Growers Association, it was a 2-night event because there's 2 different chapters of the Iowa Corn Growers Association in the 4th Congressional District. I get to the building, and J.D. Schulten and Feenstra had a forum in front of the Iowa Corn Growers Association 2 years before, and there was a lot of press on it. And I had talked to J.D. about the event. And so I was anticipating there'd be press and recording equipment. I get to the door, I look around, and there's less people in that room than there are in here. There are about 6 people. There's no recording equipment. There's no press. There's no nothing. So I know that's odd. Okay, no, that's fine, whatever though. I mean, okay. So, I go to the table, and Feenstra does his Iowa nice thing when he comes in, he shakes my hand, all that stuff. So he sits down. Then the moderator from the Iowa Corn Growers Association says the one thing I'm sure Randy Feenstra did not want her to say. She gets up and she says, man, I just want to thank Randy Feenstra for calling us to set this up. So Randy Feenstra was getting dogged in the press for dodging me on the debate stage. So he called in a favor to his friends to set up a closed box, private debate with no press and no recording equipment. Now, he had not yet made his decision as to whether he would accept the preeminent debate offer in the state, the Iowa Press debate offer and Iowa Public Television. So it wasn't supposed to be a debate. But at that point, I realized what this was. And I was like, well, I'm going to do what I want. And I turned it into one. And it was a bloodbath. And he started aggressive by the end of it. And I need to be careful with what I say about bloodbath these days, because I know Trump and bloodbath. It was a bloodbath on the debate stage. There we go. I'll use more carefully chosen words. But he started very aggressively, but by the end of it, he saw he was out of his league. And so by the end of it, he was just trying to survive. And at the end of it, we each had 3 minutes on the stage to talk about whatever we wanted. And I looked at Randy Feenstra and I said, Randy, I'm so glad that you finally agreed to be in the same room as me. Thank you, Randy. But a lot of these questions really aren't questions that get to the heart of why you're so awful as a congressman. And I said, also the fact that we're sitting here with no press and recording equipment, people deserve better. I think it's time you agree to a public debate with me. And it looked like he was eating a lemon because I was looking him right in the eyes and he was not enjoying that moment or anything else that happened before that evening. So we're done, and I'm over here shaking hands with 3 people, and he's over there shaking hands with 3 people. And then he goes in a really disproportionately loud volume. He says, "Hey, Melton, come over here." Okay. So I walk over to Randy, and I get to Randy, and I'm a foot away from him, and he's still speaking very disproportionately loudly. And I realize at this point he's doing that because I shamed him. And he wants everyone in that room to hear that he's not afraid of me. So he said, "Melton, I'll get back to you on that debate offer." And I said, "Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that." I shook his hand. I stared him deep in the eyes, and I just said, "You're going to decline it. I already know it, but thank you, Randy." 3 days later, I get the email from Iowa Public Television saying Randy Feenstra has declined our debate offer. So this is the number one question I get at pretty much every event I have is, will you get the chance to debate Randy Feenstra? Because people know I would destroy him. The problem is he knows that too. So the chances of me getting a debate with Randy Feenstra are pretty much 0, I'd say, at this point, unfortunately. But my lovely staffer Shannon back there and I, we're going to work on some things to make that very clear. Whether it be we go to whole Iowa and set up a little tent, a little event, whatever, and call it the Melton Feenstra debate. And it's an open chair debate. Whatever we need to do to amplify the point, we will. So anyway.
I did that when Phil Thompson didn't show up to the candidate forum last time we ran. I posted on all social media. By the way, I agree with both of these guys. Like us, follow us on social media, like the pages, share, repost, do whatever you can to bring attention to our campaigns. But when Phil didn't show up, I had my intern create a little "Where's Waldo" circle and put Phil's picture in the middle, and it said "Where's Phil?" And I used that extensively on social media since he was the only candidate that didn't show up that
I was a
night.
big fan when he did that. I thought that was great.
I think you need to make a life-size cutout.
Cardboard?
Yeah, and then you could hold a debate.
With an audio chip, a few choice words that they always say,
Make it a bobblehead.
I love it. I love it. Any other questions? Yeah.
Margaret, would you talk a bit about the threat to school and public libraries and your ideas for combating that threat? Excuse me, that allergies.
Well, I am a city council person, so I do know how that works. The libraries get a certain tax percent for the library. That money does come through the general fund in the cities. And then that money goes to the library, and the library board works with the librarian to set their budget. What they're short in their budget, then the city, out of the general fund, adds to it so that they have their budget. Our mayor, the board, and the librarian, if they have a vacancy, they will ask somebody to fill that vacancy. Then the librarian will come to a council meeting and say, this is who we would like to have as a library board member. The council does not vote on that at all. The mayor says, thank you, looks at all of us, but think that's a good idea. We all nod, yep. So when they wanted to come, Mr. Green, Senator Green, wanted to move their power, I don't know what word to use. Anyway, they wanted to take away the library board so that the council would choose the library board. And they also wanted to take their money and have the council decide how it was spent. So the question was asked at I went to listen to Carter Nordman and Jesse Green over in Greene County, and the question came up, would they have power over content or over what books are in the library? And both of them said no. There was no discussion over content. Well, you can see the writing on the wall. It's a way to get into banning books. So I was really glad when that did not go through. And I just, as a councilwoman, we don't have complaints. That was like, where did that come from?
Did the question come up, who was pushing for this bill?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And both of them said, well, we've had council members complain and some librarians complain too.
They're requesting this
Yeah.
change.
Well, and then you ask, can we see who, do you want to share with who that is? No, they won't. They won't. They'll tell you they have, lots of complaints, but you don't see them. So, but yeah, librarians really spoke out on that. And I was very happy to see that.
And librarians are generally fairly laid back, nice people, but I saw them getting, there was some growling and snapping going on.
And neither one of them have a library card. Neither Jesse or Carter. So, I thought that was a little ironic.
How did you find that out? Did you ask them to show their library card?
Chuck off. and
No,
go
I
to
did
class.
not.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would have been a really cool moment. Can you take out your wallet and show us your library card?
Yeah, I have 4.
Stand up. So we have a crisis of staffing in nursing homes as well as agricultural workers.
Yep.
And we have an influx of immigrants coming here. And I know that in Northwest Iowa, because I'm very familiar with Northwest Iowa, has a lot of undocumented workers, and that leads to them being vulnerable and taken advantage of. Would you support a comprehensive immigration reform that would say, agricultural visas, make it easier for people to come here and fill those positions?
100%. And I post about this and talk about this at my events.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry, yes. Would I be in favor of a robust immigration reform program that essentially created a more robust immigrant labor program, essentially, right? Absolutely. So the fact that last legislative session, one of the big things that Republicans were pushing were unconstitutional rollbacks of child labor protections. We don't have enough workers here. And again, there's reasons for that. There's a hollowing out of our state that's occurring. And we're seeing the impacts of that. I absolutely would be in support of that. I've been calling for that for quite a long time. So when a Greg Abbott is claiming that he's being overrun by immigrants, what he's doing is he's putting them on a bus for a political optics moment, and he's dropping them on someone's doorstep in a liberal town, which then the liberal town takes care of them because that's who we are. But what I would argue is that in a situation like that we have a real lack of federal state coordination as to, hey, Governor Abbott, if you really think you're being overrun, up here in Northwest Iowa, we need a lot of help. And so instead of rolling back decades of child labor protections, we'll happily welcome immigrants here.
Sioux County is a sanctuary county.
Yes, right.
You
right.
should send them to Sioux County.
Exactly. So as a baseline, right?
Counties.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So as a baseline, my view of an immigrant crossing the border from Mexico is one of, wow, that person is willing to walk thousands of miles to get their kid out of a war-torn country or a gang violence-riddled country to give them a better life. That's the kind of person we want here. Contrast that with a Donald Trump who says they're sending their worst, which is simply not true. Trump is starting to try to make this migrant crime thing a center point of his campaign. The problem is facts. So study after study after study after study shows that documented and undocumented immigrants, and I should say that there are different preferences that different people have for how we label legal versus, But I'm not going to use illegal immigrants because people are not illegal, so I don't refer to them as illegal. Study after study shows that both documented and undocumented immigrants commit crime at much lower rates than native-born citizens, right? And every time I post this on my social media accounts, the trolls have a heyday. Because that's Trump's bread and butter, is, oh, black and brown people are scary. Even though all the data shows that's absolutely not true.
And the white supremacists are far more dangerous.
Yeah. So the very rare occasion where an undocumented immigrant commits a crime in our country, every conservative news outlet is going to make it the biggest story ever. And I do want to say that obviously it's terrible when that happens. It's terrible, right? But my counter is well, if we really used that philosophy that we're going to use the exception to represent the whole, we'd have no young white men in our country left, right? Who commits the mass shootings in this country, right? And you can keep on going. We'd have nobody left if you're going to use the exception as the whole, right? The idea that immigrants contribute nothing and that the only thing they're defined for their value on are the very rare crimes they commit completely dispels the fact that if you go to a Storm Lake, Iowa, they are grateful, so grateful for immigrants saving their city, right? Towns across this state. Immense value that immigrants bring to our communities. So I absolutely be 100% on board with that. And we have historical precedent for it. The Bracero program, first half of the 1900s, we had a robust immigrant labor program. And the other thing too is this argument that we have so many folks that we don't know are here. Well, create a robust immigrant labor program, create a processing system. You'll know where they are, and you'll find they're amazing people that do amazing work. But they don't want that because they want the problem to fester, to fearmonger, to create campaign ads on. Anyway, did you two want to say anything about that, or?
All I can say is that I agree 100%. This country was built on immigrants, and there are times when the Chinese that came over to build the railroads way back in the day, the Irish immigrants, they wanted to ban Irish people from this country at one point. And this is nothing new, and it was wrong then and it's wrong now. And we do need, our falling population rates are going to put us in a situation where we don't have enough young people. We have all these old people that, we're going to need some care one of these days, and there will be nobody to provide that care. We need to bring these young, energetic, hardworking, and wonderful people into the country.
So I agree, I can't add anything more.
I think the slogan, "Make America Great Again," is right on.
Let's hear it.
It's the immigrants that need to be coming in.
Yeah.
And make America.
Absolutely.
I repeat that for the.
Yeah, the Trump
Comment.
slogan, "Make America Great Again." We can do that if we are much more warm and welcoming when it comes to immigrants.
Because that's
'Cause
what
we need
makes
them.
the country great.
That's right, we need them. And that's what it was built on. That's right, as you said. Into the questions? Yeah.
You mentioned eminent domain earlier.
Yep.
What other bells can we be ringing that would perk up the ears of the disgruntled Republicans?
Yeah, so public education is a big one. The school voucher, the public money for private schools is really unpopular in Republican homes too. So public education, the AEA attacks are really unpopular among Republicans. The book banning is really unpopular among Republicans because we talk about government overreach, like you can't read this. The number one thing, so one of my favorite things to do is to go to county fairs, and I set up shop at the Democratic Party booth because oftentimes you get Republicans to talk to you there, and I get a lot of them. The number one thing they'll say is they're concerned about waste. Usually the number one thing they'll say. Have they dug into that enough to know the Trump tax cuts are hugely wasteful and blew up our budget? Oftentimes they don't dig that deeply, but in a general sense, they care a lot about taxpayer money waste, right? And so I would target that with these public education tax, the fact that we're pouring a lot of public money into private schools. I frame it in a waste context because there is no solid data that shows that private schools overall perform better than public schools, right? And Arizona is thinking about rolling back their private school voucher program because it's blowing up their budget and the educational outcomes aren't all that different. So frame it in terms of waste. So here's the thing. This is, I think, really important to reflect on. I am unabashedly a progressive Democrat. Now, you could kind of debate what is the true definition of progressive Democrat these days, but I'm further to the left than a Rob Stand, let's just say. If I listened to what a DC consultant would tell me, they'd say, you have to moderate your message. You have to water down your message to grab those in the center right. That's really dumb advice, and I'll tell you why. I've talked to a lot of Steve King voters. The first question isn't, are you progressive or are you moderate? The first question is, who owns you? Good news is, I don't take any PAC money, or I don't take corporate PAC money.
Me either.
Yeah,
Me either.
no one owns me, and this is very easy to verify. Look me up in Open Secrets, you'll find it.
We're all self-owned.
That's right. That's right. And I challenge them, pull out your phone, pull me up in Open Secrets, and they'll see, wow, Randy Feenster's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from corporate PACs, you've taken $0.00. And that lets me not just have a foot in the door, but a whole leg. And that just keeps on going. So talk a lot about corporate power.
And I didn't get corporate PAC offers, but I did get $5 from Bill Nye the Science Guy. I want to make that perfectly clear.
I think that was the highlight of Penny's campaign last time. I remember that. And I was very excited for Penny. Nobody was. But yeah, waste, corporate power. Republicans don't like disproportionate corporate power either. These pipelines are a perfect microcosm of what corporate power can do to politicians that force them to lose all that is fundamental in what their vision for a functioning democracy should be. Yes.
Well, two, and they're unrelated. One is, I'm asking because I don't know. I saw somebody put down that the state is now, if you're in a private school, you can get up to $12,000 from the state, whereas a public school student gets $300 per student from the state. Is that anywhere?
I wouldn't say that those numbers aren't quite accurate.
Okay. But per student, would a student getting a voucher on a per student basis be getting more than?
Yeah, I think what that set is trying to get at is the fact that we have so few private school students, but they're getting a massive amount of the tax money compared to public school students. I think that's like a snapshot of a recent comparison between, but overall, I think the average public school student in Iowa gets between 10 and 15,000 per year. The problem is though, and Senator Herman Kornbach, if you know that name, so he brought this up at the Story County Convention today. So Iowa's public education system has been funded below inflation, I think 13 of the last 14 years. And right now, so if you start your clock from that starting point, we are $500 million below where we should have been just to maintain where we were, not to improve it, just to maintain. So there's a reason why you're seeing all these articles now about public school districts cutting staff, because the federal money's gone, right? Governor Reynolds cut a lot of taxes, cut a lot of programs, but rode federal money from the pandemic. That money's gone. And so now we're going to start to see the real pain. So.
And then my second unrelated, in terms of looking at smaller scale farmers in Iowa, independents and so forth, do you have some kind of, and this would be for all three of you because it's a federal and a state type question, what can we do to help small producers like smaller locally owned processing plants, for instance? Is one example. What are some ideas you have to support smaller to medium producers in the state and make us more independent once again in terms of meat production, even food production? How can we help support those types of growers?
A few things come to mind. Number one, I'm going to sound like Judy Schulten, antitrust. So monopoly breaking is a big one. Increased diversification of what we grow and promoting that is a big one. The fact that we're stuck in this ethanol status quo, I think, is a big threat to our state, considering our vehicle fleets moving towards electrification. There's going to be less need for liquid fuel. But we are run by politicians that get a lot of money from the ethanol lobby. And so they are unwilling to concede because that's where they get their money from. We need to do a much better job of promoting diversification in what we grow. And third, we have a really big opportunity in the next 10 years or so. A big chunk of our farmers are aging out. So I would recommend that the federal government find ways to reach out to amenable landowners and say, hey, considering land values are so high, and that's such a big impediment for first-time farmers, would you be willing to partner with us to give your land to first-time farmers at a lower rate? So that as long as they are adherence to more sustainable farming practices, for example, more diversification practices.
And split, if they have giant farms, split them up into smaller
Yeah.
sections.
Give more people an opportunity to get back in. We've lost hundreds of thousands of farmers
Right.
in the state. I want to get some water for you guys.
Okay.
Elaborate.
Diversification on what we grow has been a big thing for me too. For one thing, we grow very little of what we eat in this state. We have some of the richest farmland in the nation, and we grow very little of what we eat. We're trucking it in from all over the country and other parts of the world. And you get grapes from South America and bananas, right? I mean, if we, the corn, most of the corn is used for ethanol. The vast majority goes directly to the ethanol project, which harms our environment. So that's not the best use of our farmland. If we would diversify and grow, and it wouldn't take much to grow all the food, the vegetables, they've got some great new systems now for indoor farming that doesn't take much land, that it doesn't use much water, a self-contained system, very few chemicals, or if any. Set up some of these systems and grow our food locally would be a huge boon to this state. Imagine how much fresher our vegetables would be. You don't buy something that goes bad in your fridge in 3 or 4 days. You know for yourself, when you get it at farmer's market in the summer, it lasts a long time. You're amazed at how long that green pepper lasts in your fridge. That would be one thing. Also, corn for ethanol, they're trying to drag out this corn production by the carbon capture pipelines as a deliberate attempt to extend the life of this fossil fuel, which is not a benefit for us either. Let's let it go. It's natural death. Don't try a lot of subsidies and turn those farmers to farming. Hemp is a great product. Those who think it's marijuana are wrong. It's not. It doesn't have a THC content. You don't get high from smoking it, but you can make so many things. Hemp is a great food source, an excellent food source, very healthy. They're part of the plant. You can make fabric from it. You can make ropes, of course. They're cattle feed. It grows quickly.
Requires very little water.
Requires very little water. It's a
No
very
fertilizer.
Yeah, and no fertilizer. Yeah, Diana knows all these. So let's work that into our rotation and other plants. There are so many types of beans and grains and things. Let's bring back some of the, Iowa State has a program to research ancient grains that used to be grown in these areas that were native, and to bring some of those back into production. They're extremely healthy and they're appropriate for the climate. And as the climate changes, how much drought talk have you heard in the last few years? Every year, right? What's the drought situation in Iowa? Corn takes a lot of water, and as we become drier, as we will with this changing climate, we need to be thinking now, what are we going to do, and start working toward that future? What can we grow? Because there's no point in still putting corn seeds in the ground when the climate won't support it. So let's start thinking about that sort of thing.
And your question was about Tyson as well, or closing down, or?
Not specifically, but don't you think that sort of points out the idea of monopolies? You've got a couple huge producers, Smithfield, of which is Chinese owned, and rather than having numerous smaller processing plants like there used to be. And so you get the huge fallout when something like this happens.
Well, there was a bill that was up on the, brought to prevent DNR from purchasing land at all. So that was a big concern, because I think Iowa has 3% is 2 or 3%.
One of the smallest percentages of land for public use of any state, is my recollection.
So I think having that, and they own a lot of land along the rivers and creeks.
Well, I think Jesse Green, I asked, I sent my little thing, please oppose this, and he said, well, the DNR needs to take care of the lands it already has. We don't need to spread them any more thin. Of course, I'm thinking they're terribly underfunded as it is, but that's not,
Is this the question about the bill that recently came about the DNR being able to get land at auction or not getting? Is that
or private owners would not even be able to sell their land to some place like the Nature Conservancy,
right.
to put it ultimately in
The
public
argument
trust.
being on the Republican side that we don't want to give up fertile farmland for conservation and other things. That's what at least I heard from some Republicans. There's a kind of a federal component to this too, which is I think it's the acronym I think is CRP. Land that you can kind
Conservation Reserve Program.
Our waterway health is awful, right? Second highest cancer incidence rate in the country, only state with an increase in cancer incidence, and we're the toxic beach state. Every summer, the DNR sends out dozens of toxic beach warnings. Have you not heard of these?
Yes.
So the DNR posts toxic beach warnings. We have toxic beach warnings across the state where you're not supposed to swim in them.
It's at over half right now.
Yeah. There was a recent article from the Capital Dispatch that I posted, right, that well over half of the waterways sampled are not up to par. And a lot of this is due to ag chemical runoff, for example, because it's pretty much unregulated, right? As far as it, if you're, and I do want to make clear, I was just talking to Kim about this out there. I believe that you can be pro-farmer and pro-clean water at the same time. And just spend an evening with the Iowa Farmers Union. A lot of farmers that know the status quo is not acceptable when it comes to waterway health.
Or sustainable.
And they want to do something about it. And so I get called anti-farmer for being concerned about that chemical runoff on our waterways. There are plenty of farmers that are concerned about it. There are some farmers that have started to take voluntary efforts to put buffer strips between their land and waterways, for example. But we are in a pressing need in this state to stop growing right up to the riverbank, for example. Like we should be incentivizing finding land that is being farmed that shouldn't be. Land that's in 2-year floodplains being farmed because we have a federal crop insurance program that incentivizes really reckless behavior, right? I'm in insurance, I'm in car and home insurance. We would never write a policy that endorses and incentivizes risky behavior. The point of insurance is to mitigate risk. The crop insurance program amplifies it. And so when you have cropland that goes through a flood, you're going to lose your nitrate, and that's going to go into our waterways, which goes into our drinking water. The other thing too is that the federal threshold, the federal requirement for nitrate as far as milligrams per liter in our drinking water is 10. The only reason it's 10 is because any more than that, you get blue baby syndrome, where young babies can die from drinking that water. That's why our threshold is 10 milligrams per liter. We have plenty of scientific research that shows that water consumed over time at 5 milligrams per liter brings about really severe health consequences. But I was talking to Kim about the Des Moines Water Works, Bill Stowe, and water quality and all that. There's a great Iowa Press episode that came out a few months ago that has David Sweartney on it, a really well-known Iowa water quality scientist, along with the current CEO of the Des Moines Water Works. And they were talking about this EPA threshold of 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate and how it's probably too high. You'd have to completely rethink and pull out and restart as far as water quality infrastructure if there's a federal mandate for 5. The amount of expense, cost. But I'd argue that there's an immense amount of cost to having a cancer epidemic, a cancer crisis in our state. There's a massive amount of downstream cost to municipalities who are required to clean water already. And so I'm a big advocate for clean water. I'm a big advocate for regulatory action to lower that milligrams per liter nitrate threshold, because we have all the data we need. It's far too high.
And with that,
I think it's time to wrap it up, folks.
Where are we at? What time is it? 2:21. Okay, that's fine.
Well,
I mean, I could be here all
we
day.
can stay, well, we can stay, but I thought if there's some who want to go,
You're not being held hostage.
no, that's true. How long did you plan for online? Did you put a time?
I think it was 1 to 3.
Or was it?
That's
Well,
what you put in the paper for the thing, but if
Ah.
we'll,
Well, it's only 2:21, so we can hang out and talk, or we
okay,
can,
I'm gonna end the live stream at
Okay.
this point.
That's fine. That's fine.
and